New York Giants, our 2023 preview for the New York Giants. The Cardinals this week, when waivers happened, the Cardinals put in 6 waiver claims. They got 6 players off of waivers. Last year on cutdown day, the Giants were one of the teams that was doing that. The Giants had such little roster talent overall as Joe Shane and Brian Dable were remaking this franchise and this entire team that they were scraping the bottom of the barrel for players last season. That's where they were. And then they went to the playoffs. And it's amazing how fast things have accelerated in terms of expectations. They paid the quarterback, just so many things that just feel crazy now compared to what they would have felt like a year ago. But that's the whiplash that's kind of happened with this team. And there are some competing expectations. Their over-under is 7.5. There's some things on either side of the argument that could push you to be more or less optimistic about this team. But where they were on cutdown day in 2022, and then the way the season ended, and I think how much differently we feel about the players on that team, some of the players on that team, the coaching staff, and just the direction the arrow is pointed, independent of the 2023 results with this Giants team, it feels very, very different than it did at the end of the Joe Judge era, or really any point over the last 4 or 5 years in New York.
Ironically, the Giants played bigger than they were and punched above their weight, which is kind of doesn't fit their name all the way, but they did. They played like Giants compared to what they should be. But they felt like they're a year ahead, like this regime does. Like they felt like that was a bonus year. I think that's how we refer to them mostly early in the year. Hey, however the chips fall, they'll figure it out. They'll figure out who to build around everything. And
we were enjoying watching them. And I think it started with that Packer game, and they did some stuff.
Yeah, the London game, right? Yes.
Yeah, the Packer game in London.
Was kind of like, okay.
They were doing some stuff with the 2 back looks that were so funky, but they didn't really have any players to populate the rest of the offense. So it all made sense. And that's why I guess we can save this for expectations, but that's why I don't really know what to make of this team because they're over under 7.5. They went 8-4-1 in close games last year. They were a below average team, according to a lot of advanced metrics. A lot of signposts and clues would lead you to believe that this team was going to take at least a small step, maybe a significant step back this year. And I just can't bring myself to do that because of how good the coaches were last year. And I almost think we're forgetting that when the way that people are talking about this team and the Vegas totals and just some of the discourse around them, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt because of the meal they made with the discount groceries that they had to shop for a year ago.
Yeah, and even I think like their expected win-loss was on, I think it was like 8 and change, and they went 9-6-1 or 9-7-1 last year. So it wasn't like they got like crazy lucky, and like no offense to the Vikings or anything, but they were the same kind of expected win-loss, and they won 13 games. So it's like that's a big difference as opposed to how lucky maybe just even point differential. And I think what you're saying is they did. Wink Martindale's on defense is just going to do his thing, but at least it's aggressive. So at least, sometimes it hits, and sometimes you just keep betting and doubling down and you just keep winning. And it's like, wow. And on offense, we've really liked the staff, like you said, and also they got some better horses, even if there aren't, they're interesting.
It's not crazy. So let's talk about the offense.
Yeah,
okay?
Sure. Sorry.
So it's not crazy, the guys that they added. Going out and getting Darren Waller. Darren Waller's been banged up, but he's 30-something. It's important to point out who was playing for this team at the end of last season. Okay. Richie James got 40 snaps for the Giants in the divisional round. He had the second most snaps of any wide receiver on the team last season. Matt Breida played 21 snaps in the divisional round. Combined in their 2 playoff games last year, Saquon and Matt Breida played 20 snaps together. These are ridiculous ways to construct an NFL offense. It's not the way you want to play. They were doing what they had to do last year with some of these guys. So even if it's just Jalen Hyatt and Sterling Shepard and Darren Waller and maybe some improvements along the offensive line, these are significant steps forward personnel-wise, even if they're not huge stars. And that's why I'm kind of bullish on what they could be.
Last year, and it was a good thing when we're talking about this offense, and it may be a negative when we're talking about Daniel Jones, was it had a lot of training wheels. This
so
offense
that becomes the question.
Yes, it was, and this is where I think this will lead to my answer to. Obviously, you want to answer to a question, but they were first in bootleg percentage. Okay, double the league average.
It's crazy.
He was dead last, Daniel Jones, in average air yards on those plays. So you know what that means?
And he was second to last. Period.
So that means he was throwing, when they ran bootlegs, he was just throwing the flat, which is good. That means it was a great design that made that guy popped wide open, and that's why he threw it, the short routes. But it kind of leads you to what happens when it's more difficult. They were top 10 in RPO rate. They were top 10 in play action rate. I'm not saying like that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's why we kind of were hesitant about paying Daniel Jones. It's like they really had a lot of training wheels and easy buttons for this offense. So then my focus goes to the drop back game and how do they add to it. Last year, it was putting Isaiah Hodgins, who they got from the Bills, and putting him in the slot running choice routes.
Got from the Bills is strong. He was released. He was a waiver claim. They didn't trade for that guy.
So I couldn't remember if they cut him or they traded like a 7th round pick for him. So I couldn't remember.
I'm pretty sure he was available.
So yeah, snatch from the street via the Bills. But that was their answer. So putting it that way, that was their drop back answer, was putting him in the slot couldn't even make the Bills team. And then the preseason though, you look at the drop back game, it's hi, Darren Waller. Let's just feature you everywhere, which isn't a bad answer. It's what's the sustainability of that? These are the same. I'm leaving with some questions, but I could see some of the answers of maybe implementing those new role players. Jalen Hyatt, you can see even how they're using him. Again, Mike Kafka is really good at this. He uses these guys exactly how they should be used. I'm going to put him in motion so I don't have to worry about him versus press, and I'm going to have him run vertical. Awesome.
Mike Kafka's background with some of these guys is particularly intriguing to me. When he was with the Chiefs, think about Tyreek Hill early in his career and the ways that they wanted to use him, just kind of as like a gadgety type player.
Yep.
And then Waller, Mike Kafka has plenty of experience as part of a staff that built an offense around a tight end as your number one receiver. This is not something where there's a lot of imagination necessary. They've lived this Travis Kelce life. I'm not saying Darren Waller's Travis Kelce, but building your offense this way, it's not a jump for him to figure out the best way to construct that type of offense.
Showing it, which is like, hey, again, everyone can say what they want, but you have to show it. And they already showed it in the preseason. So it's like, okay. I kind of maybe see what you're doing here.
My big question, and I have faith in this group and what they've done so far. What does it look like as you open it up? When you give the quarterback whatever he's making a year, $40 million, you need to open it up. Yes. You need to take that step. He's making 22 against the cap this year. He's making 45 against the cap next year. I know overall, I think he has the 13th highest AAV. Next season, he's going to play most likely in that $45 million cap hit because they don't want to push that money into future years. A lot of the time when you have that sort of cap hit, the quarterback doesn't play on it because there are guys that you don't mind just kicking the can down the road. Josh Allen, Mahomes, they've converted a couple times. I don't know if that'll happen. So from a team building perspective, it is a potential impediment. So he needs to play beyond that impediment, and that needs to start this year.
Yeah.
When you
he needs to throw some more touchdowns than 15 this year.
Open it up in every way. I went back and watched the Eagles game yesterday, and the way the Eagles were playing them defensively was hilarious. They're in quarters, and the safeties are 11 yards from the ball. There was just no respect for this team's ability to beat you over the top or push the ball down the field. And you can't have that be the reality that you're living in. If you're paying your quarterback this amount of money, that can't be an answer for opposing defenses. And I think that guys like Darius Slayton, like Jalen Hyatt, like Paris Campbell, they have the skill set to be more explosive on offense. Now you just need to see it. You need to see the offense opened up enough to give the quarterback the opportunity to play like the guy that you just paid him to be. And there's some uncertainty with that, and there's some mystery with that. But again, I just have faith in this group to potentially make that set of circumstances work for them in the end.
Right. They keep showing it like that. That's what I mean. Like they keep proving, I wouldn't say proving us wrong, but they find answers. They find their way to make it, like, I wouldn't say as simple as possible, but find answers that work for what they have. Like they really just use their players well. Like that's a high compliment you could have for a coach. What you're talking about with the field stretching though, it's like, that's where you hope Hyatt can come in. Cause even if they say they still lean into play actions and all that, that's going to give Waller more room to work over the middle on intermediate routes. There's not much. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the Eagles example because that's a great example of where it could go wrong living this way. If you don't threaten guys deep or threaten them with drop back games where they have to cover the whole field and you just keep running over routes with post routes, which is what a lot of play action is, the safeties, if they're smart, like Eagles safeties were last year, we'll just pass it off every single time. All right, now what? No, you're going to check it down every time? Okay, here's a 2-yard gain. So again, finding answers and maybe just the stuff that did work for them last year, finding better talent at those spots. So it's an interesting mix. It really is. And then like you look at the run game, the opponent personnel was hilarious because they're so freaking good out of it, got good out of it. But that's a feature. That's not, I'm sorry, that's not a feature. That's just a role thing, a bit that you do. That's not something you really feature. And so that's the balance that they have to find, that some of these kind of quirks that they have can make them kind of more live off of them than maybe just use them once in a while.
Saquon Barkley getting the amount of targets that he got for a low volume passing game. I want Saquon Barkley to be merely a good player and good piece of an otherwise healthy NFL offense, not everything that the offense needed to be.
Just snap it directly to him.
That's all I want, is for him to just have a normal role and get to shine in that role compared to what he did last year or had to do last year.
And then I got one Daniel Jones running stat. Of all players, running backs and quarterbacks, I'm not aware of any other position that could do this, with 100 or more designed runs last year. So design runs, not just scrambles. He was second in success rate, only behind Lamar. And I think that is an exceptional stat, that Daniel Jones's legs is one of the most like significant rushing weapons in the entire NFL.
Yeah.
And again, it's pretty funny that he's also second in scramble rate, and he was good at scrambles and all that. Only behind Justin Fields, though, which again, there's some similarities between Daniel Jones and Justin Fields. That's really, really funny that you would never think about. But once you start watching their play styles, that maybe that's what Justin Fields needs, is this type of offense for him.
Just a couple more, I think are important to point out. 40th out of 41 quarterbacks in big time throw rate, according to PFF. They were 28th in explosive pass rate last year in the NFL, and they still finished with a top 10 defense in weighted DVOA. So if they can they do so many things well, and it's so well constructed. If they can open this thing up and push the gas down a little bit more, I think that they could be pretty fun to watch on offense in a way that maybe people aren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah, sound and quirky at the same time. I think that's how it's gonna be. But I mean, that's a compliment.
Biggest question about the New York Giants defense heading into the season. What do you got?
How the back end shakes out, the DB room, and just how, I mean, you know what Wink Martindale is going to run, their defense coordinator. It's going to be a lot of man coverage, a lot of blitzing. So how does he use these guys? Can these guys step up? Deontay Banks, their first round pick at corner, has shown flashes already, but it's still a rookie corner that's going to be living in man coverage.
They got two. They got two rookie corners, and a 6th round pick is starting as the other corner.
You gotta love that. I love living a 6th round pick in man coverage. Who knows? But at least his job's simple. At least he knows what he's going to do every snap. But because they have some real beef up front, in theory, they should be hard to run against, but it's just how they're going to defend the pass. This team gave up so many explosive plays last year that they have to shore that up. They're going to live by the sword and die by the sword, but we have to find some more sustainability than just like truly like, okay, we get a big play or you get a big play. There has to be some more boringness, I think, with this defense. And really that is down to how their DBs play, because that'll lead to some more boringness, I think, in a good way.
They were 31st in adjusted games lost in the defensive backfield last year. The guys they were trotting out, Fabian Moreau, I mean, some of the players that got a lot of snaps for this team, they were really banged up at corner. So even with rookies, you'd hope they'll be better at those spots. And it's not like they don't have guys on the roster who've played before. So Trey Hawkins getting that starting role, he's pushing guys like Darnay Holmes and people who've gotten slot snaps, them thinking that Adoree Jackson in the slot and Trey Hawkins outside is their best group. I think that says more about what Trey Hawkins has shown in camp rather than some huge personnel deficiency, because they've had guys who've been in those roles before, and this is still what they've landed on. The bigger issue to me than even the defensive backfield and the pass defense, this team was horrendous against the run last season. Like truly horrendous. And what's funny is that they were not built to be horrendous against the run. They played with light boxes at the second lowest rate in the NFL on early downs. Only the Dolphins were higher, and they finished dead last in yards before contact per attempt on defense. It was like 2.4 yards before the running back was touched, despite playing with the second heaviest boxes in the league. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
I don't even know how you could manage that.
In theory, that's what I said. In theory, they should be good against the run. And then every stat you look at, every stat is terrible.
But the personnel was much different, though. I think they looked at their run defense deficiencies last year and said, we're not doing this again. They went out and got A'Shawn Robinson. They got Akeem Nunez-Roches. They signed Bobby Okereke in free agency. Yep. The names I was talking about at corner, it was worse at linebacker. Jalen Smith was the starter for them. He's a practice squad player now. Tay Crowder played 450 snaps for them last year. He's not on a roster. And then the other guy I wanted to ask you about, What do you think of the Isaiah Simmons trade?
I'd love it for this team because how he'll get used, man.
He could be used in a very specific role.
What does Wink Martindale lean into? Man coverage and blitzing. Literally Isaiah Simmons' best attributes because he doesn't have to think. He's not a quick thinker on the football field. So if you limit kind of what you ask of him, okay, you cover the tight end, you cover the running back, or you're blitzing. I like that. Like if he has a chance to stick in this league, this is it. Like this is the type of defense that he has to be in. Can't carry over my breakout player for the Cardinals though. Or can't carry that over. I have a different answer for that, but as a joke, I almost wanted to carry it over. Like, hey, does this work for this one too? But
the beef they added and the run defensive pieces that they added, I think was the correct way to approach this offseason resources wise. Yep. And then they still have Dexter Lawrence. They still have Leonard Williams. Their pass rush with Kayvon Thibodeau coming on in the second half of last year. I trust what they can do getting after the quarterback with this group and the way that they blitz. The run defense was the biggest question. And credit to Joe Shane for understanding that and for doing everything he can to try to make sure it is not as much of an issue heading into this year.
Yeah, usually when defenses get pushed around, some interior defensive issue, like, look at the Chargers or maybe the Browns the last couple of years, and it's like, wow, they can't plug anybody up there. This was a team that has more depth there, but it was just the linebackers causing so many of the issues. Yeah. It was just that they were truly negative players. And again, this is living in man coverage, which can get manipulated as far as run fits. So you need smart linebackers to sort everything out. If you have slow playing linebackers, they can really get taken advantage of. And you got to think of who was in this division. The teams they're playing against, it's like they can get taken advantage of. That's why they just give up so many explosives. So a little bit more solidness there. And Kurokwe is like perfect for that.
And they paid for it, but I think they understood that they probably needed to. So I think they will be much better in that area than they were last season.
Yep.
X factor for the 2023 Giants. What do you got?
The passing game equation. That's how I ended up phrasing it.
Weird ones out here in this last one. You saved the weird ones for last.
Shoot, I can't keep saying like the quarterback, the just like I keep feeling I'm doing the same one. So I just had to change it up. But no, the continuing evolution on that side of the ball is just so fascinating. And I just want to see what the drop back game is, how much they lean into the easy buttons. Like, do they lean into maybe some yellow difficulty things instead of just all the green difficulty stuff? So I just want to see it because
ski run. He's been doing the bunny hill and the greens the entire day.
Bunny hills this entire time. Let's get to the black diamond. Like I want to see what happens there.
That's maybe a little much.
That's a little too much. Yeah, that's maybe not that.
Blues for DJ this year might be enough to satisfy what we're after.
So we'll just see it. But I want to see a more sustainable future. It's like let's see a green season and a yellow season. I think a little bit too.
I'm going with Evan Neal. Top 10 pick last year, really struggled as a rookie at right tackle. Again, watching that Eagles game yesterday and just his inability to deal with Hassan Reddick, especially early in that game. Part of the issue, I think, in their inability to throw the ball downfield last year is they really couldn't protect the way that they wanted to. And so they've made some changes along the offensive line. They drafted John Michael Schmitz. He's going to be their day one center in the second round. But Neal is somebody they need to take a big step forward in year two. That can happen.
Yes.
Look no further than this team with Andrew Thomas and some of the development stories that have happened at that position.
Correct.
So if Neal takes a big step and Schmitz gives him some stability at center, I think the offensive line can go from what was a decided weakness at the end of last year to at least a neutral this year. And does that allow you one more reason that you can open up the offense a little bit compared to what we saw last season?
Nope. That's a great call.
Breakout candidate for the 2023 Giants. What do you got?
I wanted to go Thibodeau, but I actually
I didn't. I
didn't either. Okay, so he gets kind of like an honorable mention for both of us. But I went with
a top 5 pick. He came on last season. We don't need to do this.
I know. I went with Isaiah Hodgins, who I think was a revelation last year.
Hodgins.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I think he's.
I like Isaiah Hodgins. It's just a fun. I like it.
Yeah, I know. But looking at this team, it was kind of I don't know. All right, so I went with Hodgins. It was. Watching him last year, again, I always bring up these slot plays. Didn't have a ton of usage there. It was only like 15% of his snaps ended up being from the slot. But maybe even with 30 slot guys on this team, maybe sprinkle him in a little bit more as an inside-outside guy. He was 11th in successful targets per route run from the slot last year. Like among everybody, it was like in between like Keenan Allen and somebody else. I can't remember the other guy, but he was up there. Like this guy is a very efficient receiver. He has a little bit more to him, a little bit more route running than I was expecting when I went to watch him. So I'm sticking with Hodgins. I think he could end up being like a good number 2 in this league, but not star, but I think he'll break out a little bit more, a little sustainability.
So impressed with him at last season when he got on the field. I thought he did a lot of really good things. The slot player thing, I think, has been overstated. Sterling Shepard, I think, is just a luxury, as a bonus, whatever you get from him at this stage. His inability to stay on the field. Paris Campbell, even though he was a slot player for the Colts last year, I think he's going to be the splash the water guy. Okay. And Breida was that often last year. If you look at some of the jet motion and the orb that they were doing, just kind of give defenses a bit of confusion before the snap, Breida was doing a lot of that in that pony personnel. I think you'll see Paris Campbell in that role a lot more often this year. So not just a slot player, but just kind of a, hey, look at this kind of player within that offense. Yeah. And Wan'Dale Robinson's not really that type of player. He's back healthy. So even though they have a lot of
what type of player? Slot? That's all he does.
The
jet stuff,
the splash water jet stuff.
Yeah. I was gonna say
he's just a different sort of slot player than a guy like Paris Campbell. So even though they have a lot of quote unquote slot guys, I think they fill different roles within the offense in a way that maybe makes more sense than just looking at the depth chart, just saying they got 6 slot guys. How is this going to work?
I think it was because with their offseason roster, it was hilarious. But also just what add on with Hodgins is why I like him. Is I think it's because he can go inside and out.
Totally.
And that's why I think it's pretty cool with him, even if they have some depth there, or I thought so.
I also did not do Thibodeau, even though I was going to. I'm going with Jason Pinnock, who was a waiver claim last year. He was one of those guys that they claimed off waivers, ended up sticking,
better,
playing a lot of snaps for them. He just is. He's long. He's hyper athletic. He had some nice moments last year, and him stepping in as a full-time starter this year and kind of really year 2 of his career. I just think that he's got some tools to him. And the fact that he really took that job and ran with it this off the season, I think just says a lot about him. So he had a couple splash plays in training camp that were pretty impressive. And this is kind of a shot in the dark, but I truly think that he could have some moments this year for this team.
Hey, it's a good defense to claim talent from. That's from that Jets team. I'll take some talented guys from there just to give them a shot. So that's a good one. I was not expecting that name at all. So I like that.
I got you.
You did.
What is success for the 2023 Giants? This is hard.
I just said a winning record and making sure like Daniel Jones, like they feel good about Daniel Jones. I said this, they're a year ahead in this regime. So it's kind of it's like a bonus year a little bit.
I think making the playoffs.
Okay.
I honestly do. In this NFC, you paid the quarterback.
Yeah, right.
There's no slow play in this. You paid the quarterback. So you've accelerated the timeline by doing that. Again, he's making 45 against the cap this next year. He's making 22 this year. You're paying that guy that sort of money. I don't think there's any feeling out period here after being a playoff team last year. I understand how they landed on it. Whatever we think of the deal now is kind of immaterial. But when you do that, and you do what you did last season, I think that you expect to be or hope to be a playoff team.
We'll see. Winning record might be a playoff team. 9-8 might make the playoffs in this NFC. So that might be the same answer.